member of the Finance and Foreign Relations Committee. So, Senator, thank you so much for being with us today.
David, always good to be on with you.
So let's start with the Hong Kong situation. We have Speaker Pelosi this morning early coming out and saying we should revisit our relations with Hong Kong, our trade relations, because we still have relatively free trade relations with Hong Kong as opposed to China. We asked Wilbur Ross, the Secretary of Commerce, recently. He said it's a complicated issue. He's not sure that it shouldn't be folded into the larger discussions. What is your position on how the United States should be reacting to what's going on in Hong Kong?
Well, first, I think China is making a mistake by not allowing Hong Kong to continue to be that sort of beacon of free enterprise and to be really an entry point for the United States and other countries, particularly European countries. It's been an incredibly successful economy, and it's helped China, frankly. So I'm always amazed that I was in Hong Kong about 2 years ago, that the Chinese don't realize that, this has been a successful experiment in not just free markets, but a more democratic approach. And I would hope that they would allow Hong Kong to continue to do that, but also to see how that works in the rest of China.
As trade representative in a former life, you negotiated some of these big, complicated international trade deals. How might the conflict going on in Hong Kong right now read against President Xi's position with respect to the larger trade negotiations in the United States? And let me ask you quite pointedly, is it possible he'll feel he needs to be even tougher in those negotiations because he doesn't want to appear weak at home?
Well, I don't know. It's a complicated domestic, internal political situation, I imagine, with President Xi. But the bottom line is the United States and China need to have a mutually beneficial trade relationship. It's really important for both countries. And it needs to be sustainable, and it's not now, because you look at what China has done, not just to the United States, but to all their other trading partners, which is they haven't played by the rules with regard to subsidies, with regard to intellectual property, specifically the licensing agreements, the joint venture agreements that they require. We don't require that in our country, nor do other countries around the world. So there's not reciprocity, there is not ultimately equity, and there is not, therefore, sustainability. So we need to work this out. And Hong Kong, again, should be part of the mix, but Hong Kong ought to be an area where China continues to allow a more free market approach, which is beneficial certainly to the residents of Hong Kong, and they want it, as you've seen with these demonstrations. This is not just about extradition. I think this is about a much larger issue about China exerting its influence and rule over Hong Kong. So my hope is that the G20 summit, we can make progress on all this, because it will be an opportunity for the negotiators to, come up with some additional progress in connection with a meeting that I hope takes place between President Xi and President Trump. And my hope is that we can move forward on all these issues. We were very close just a few weeks ago, and my sense is that we could get back to the bargaining table. We could have come up with a productive result.
The question is how much progress at that G20 meeting. We talked with Wilbur Ross, the Secretary of Commerce, and he actually lowered expectations, saying that's not the place to get a deal done. Just listen to a moment for what he had to say.
The most that'll be done is they'll decide that it's worth reopening. But I don't think that a G20 pull-aside is a very likely place for the details of a 2,500-page agreement to be worked out.
As a member of the Foreign Relations Committee and also as a former trade representative, set the expectations for us. How high should the expectations be for the end of this month at the G20?
Well, it's always an action-forcing event when you have the two heads of state, the two principals in this case, both of whom are intimately involved in this issue. As you know, President Trump has strong views about it, as does President Xi. So I think it's a good thing they're meeting. I think it's a good thing that they have the opportunity to talk about these issues. And again, it'll force the negotiators, at a minimum, to summarize where we are and to figure out, how we can make some additional progress. So my hope is that it will lead to the kicking off of talks again. It will have more detailed discussions, both in Beijing and here in Washington, and we come up with a resolution. But again, as I said earlier, China needs to realize this is not just about the United States, and we need to bring other countries into this more for that reason. It's about Japan, it's about the EU, it's about other countries in Southeast Asia, it's about other trading partners who share the same concerns we do about the issues. It's about the imbalance in trade, about the subsidies, about the intellectual property, the transfer of technology. So there are opportunities here for us to use this as an action-forcing event to get more focus on the talks again and to make some progress.
Senator, as you know so well, China's not the only trade issue pending right now in front of the United States, in front of the Congress, actually. Let's talk about the USMCA, the successor to NAFTA. Apparently, we've put behind us, at least for the time being, those tariffs that were threatened against Mexico. Does that set us up to readdress the USMCA, and what are the prospects of getting that ratified in the reasonably near future?
I think the decision between Mexico and the United States to come up with an agreement to avoid the tariffs, which, as you know, David, I felt were self-defeating, was great, and I think that will help, and it should be a momentum builder for the USMCA, which is a really important agreement for us. The International Trade Commission has said it will create another 170,000 jobs here in this country. It's very important to Ohio because we have a lot of manufacturing jobs and auto jobs that are going to benefit from it. It's very important to our farmers, particularly with the uncertainty in the China market. The Mexican market, the Canadian markets are our two top markets for Ohio agricultural products. So this is when we need to get across the finish line. I think we still got some work to do, frankly. And I think what we need to do is be very clear with the American people and with the members of Congress who are on the fence on this, that the choice is binary. It's, do you want to stick with the U.S. agreement with Mexico and Canada now called NAFTA, the North American Free Trade Agreement, or do you want to move forward with this new agreement called the USMCA, U.S.-Canada-Mexico agreement? If we don't move forward with the new agreement, we're stuck with the old one. And it is not good for the United States in a number of different regards. First, it's 26 years old, has to be updated. It doesn't include things like the new modern internet economy. It doesn't include any labor reforms. It doesn't include any environmental or labor protections. It doesn't include the kinds of things that will lead to more jobs being created here in the auto sector and elsewhere because of the rules of origins that are in there. So there's a lot of good stuff in there to protect intellectual property, to protect American jobs. So the choice is either status quo, which is existing NAFTA, or the USMCA, the new agreement. And my hope is that we can get the votes in the House and Senate and get it done here before the August break.
Okay, Senator, thank you so very much. Really appreciate your time, as always. That's Republican Senator Rob Portman of Ohio. Alex?